Hello.
Hey Chris, how you doing?
Good.
I'm still sequestered here in my parents' basement, and the kids are having some sort of a protest rally outside the door here, so it might get a little loud. I'm not sure.
I'm at least in a quiet space. So
Thanks for hopping on. How have you been anyway?
I have been well. So how's the house situation?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can't move in yet.
Okay.
We're having the floors redone for one thing. So the guy pulled up the carpet in this. It's the master bedroom, and underneath it wasn't even like a real floor. It was like half linoleum and half like this cheap laminate.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that increased the cost of the job considerably. It's like you never know. All right. Welcome to Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise
Thank you.
from Propelics. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. Today, we have Chris Bingham. Chris Bingham is the CTO at Crimson Hexagon. Chris, thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And why don't we start out by tell us about your background in technology and how you wound up at Crimson Hexagon?
Sure. Well, I've worked at all kinds of tech companies, big and small, over the years. I was out in Silicon Valley for a number of years after I graduated from college, and I worked at Apple Computer for a while. You may have heard of them. Not in a very interesting time to work at Apple, unfortunately. That was like the non-Steve Jobs area.
Oh,
Dubious time for Apple.
yeah.
But it was a very, very interesting place to work. Of course, I worked at Netscape for a little while. I worked at some startup out there, and then a number of other companies here in the Boston area. Then of differing sizes. So I've been here at Crimson for 8 years, since early 2008. We got it started, and Crimson Hexagon was co-founded by Candace Fleming and Gary King. Gary is a professor at Harvard, and Gary's still the chairman of our board. And Candace was a friend of mine from our previous job. And Candace was out on maternity leave with her second child, and we just had our second child as well, my wife and I. So we were sort of exchanging parenting, talk and so forth. And she mentioned that she was about to quit our company and start this new thing, which is, a bold move while out on maternity leave. But, she had met Gary, and they decided to found a company together. And so Candace got, eventually raised some money and put together a plan. And so in early 2008, I started, and we took it from there. So that's really how I began with the firm.
Your website says that you guys create social data you can work with and that you help the world's smartest brands use insights derived from social data to drive strategy across their organizations. Can you just elaborate on that mission statement a little bit?
Our real mission is to democratize consumer insight across the employees of our customers. And what I mean by that is, by democratizing consumer insight is, democratize means, for us at least, means making it, those kinds of insights, more widely available, more easily accessible than they would be if they were siloed into any one particular organization, or just the province of the market research department or something like that. And by consumer insight, I really mean anything that would help you understand your audience, the market, your competitors, how you're perceived, or your products, what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the world that might affect you and your business. What are those conversations? What are the topics, the themes? Who are the people? How are they connected? Who and what is influential? What's changing? How is it different from last year? How is it, different from 5 minutes ago? All that can really inform your business strategy by being able to better understand that audience. I don't think anyone ever feels like they know their customers well enough. That's always one of the mantras everyone repeats is knowing your customer. Who are they? What do they like? What do they like about us? What do they not like? The better you can understand that, the better decisions you can make. And one of the interesting things about using social media as a source for those kinds of insights is you can break out into a wider world beyond just the interactions you have with the people that are already your customers. So if you think about it, the people that are already your customers, you're interacting with you, that's a tiny subset of the total number of people in the world, of course, even for the biggest companies. And their interactions with you are a tiny fraction of the interactions that they have with, the rest of the people and things in their lives.
Sure.
And so through social, of course, people are just talking organically about the things, and people that are interesting and important to them. And so if you can listen to that and understand that, then you can get the insight on what really matters to those people, not just what they said when they called up on the phone with a question about your product, or when they filled in, one of your surveys, or clicked on one of your ads or something like that. Those are all, useful measurements and interactions that you want to track. But to break out of that sort of narrow mode of interaction and see, like, who are these people? What do they really like, when they're not buying our products or interacting with us?
So it's kind of a funny name, Crimson Hexagon. Can you explain what that means?
I can, because I was the person who suggested the name. There's a story behind it. Of course, when we started the company, we had some weird placeholder name to start. And as you probably know, it's sort of maddeningly difficult to come up with a name that makes sense, you can spell, and you can also buy the .com for it. So we ended up with Crimson Hexagon. It comes from a story by Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian novelist and writer, who wrote sort of, I guess you could say, sort of proto-sci-fi stories in a way. And he wrote a story called The Library of Babel. And in this story, he imagined this infinite library consisting of hexagonal rooms joined by corridors. And in this library, with its infinite rooms, was therefore contained an infinite number of books. And therefore, all possible books that could ever have been written or ever could be written were included somewhere within the infinite rooms of the library. And so all knowledge, all wisdom, all history is included here somewhere, but also all books that were full of just the same word repeated over and over, or nonsense, or some book of key knowledge and wisdom, but with one important thing changed. And so getting useful wisdom and knowledge from the library was impossible without having some sort of guide or key to where the useful information could be found. And that guide was found in one of these rooms. The Crimson Hexagon was the room that sort of contained the master directory to everything else. And so if you could find the Crimson Hexagon, then you could unlock all the value in the infinite amount of information in the infinite library. And so that was quite apt for our purposes, because with 1 trillion posts of social media data, we have not quite infinite, but pretty darn big. And also, as anyone who's used social media knows, the vast majority of it is nonsense in one way or another. But if you can find, the relevant information in that 1 trillion posts, what's relevant for you and your business and can answer your question, then you've got a tremendous source of insight.
Yeah, that's cool. What a great story. Do you think that there's any way that enterprises, or maybe some of your clients are already doing this, but that they can use your data to determine the direction of their mobile apps?
The great thing about this kind of social derived insights is you can use what you learn from social media not just to affect your social media strategy. That's how people started out 5 years ago or something. They would say, okay, let's start listening to what people are saying on Twitter to help inform what content we put out on Twitter, or how we build a community or get more followers or likes or things like that. But what people have come to realize, and I think this has been our position all along, that the social derived insights can inform all aspects of your business. And so when you're developing an app, you can be looking at analytics, for the app itself of what people are clicking on and how they're actually using the product. But you can also try to figure out, who are our users? What are they talking about? What are those people interested in? What kinds of problems they have that we might be able to solve? And like I said, you sort of broaden your horizons a little bit beyond just like what button they tapped most frequently, to get like a deeper understanding of that. Then you can turn around and make a more strategic decision about what is this app doing for them? How does it fit in within the rest of their their lives? That I think can be really valuable for app developers.
Sure. And then how do you present your findings? Like, is it sort of like with Google Analytics where you'll have a ranking of word usage and in relation to other word usage? Or is it that the client is looking for specific phrases, across social media channels? How does it usually present itself?
Typically what one of our customers would do is start out with some queries, basically asking a question. You think about it the same way you would if you asked a question in, a focus group or a survey or something like that. Like, what do people think about this? And so you think of some keywords you can search for that will bring back, conversation on that topic. And we have built up an enormous repository of social media content, closing in on this year on 1 trillion posts, tweets, blogs, Facebook, you name it. So, 1 trillion, sort of individual opinions that people have expressed on something. And so you can search all that for keywords and other attributes like, demographic characteristics or geo or, whatever you want to look at. And then start looking at, so, what did they say and what is the audience of people participating in that conversation? And we have some proprietary technology that enables you to further break down that conversation into particular topics or themes, and quantify that, track how that's changed over time very accurately. So not only can you sort of like zoom in and, sort of like look at what people are saying, and just sort of read it for yourself, you can actually sort of measure, potentially very, large amounts of data, millions and millions of posts, going back 8 years, to see, how they specifically talked about certain things that you want to measure. Because, everyone, when they, want to look at data like this, they're coming at it from a different perspective. And, someone who's an app developer, wanting to do maybe some product research on, how their app would be used, is very different than someone in an agency who wants to understand, how effective their campaign is at affecting, the online conversation, versus somebody at a brand who, wants to know how their products are perceived relative to the competitors. So, they've all got different perspectives and different things that they would like to be able to measure. And so we give them the tools to be able to very specifically and precisely say, I'd really like to see what people are saying on, topics X, Y, and Z. and I can explain to the system what I'm, how to define those topics, and I can see very accurately, how many people are talking about those different things and track that over time, as well as understanding the audience, the composition of the audience itself.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that this software would be very powerful for use with political campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is, and we have had some political campaigns use the product in the past. The one downside for that as a business is, apart from it being cyclical, of course, is people tend to not have a lot of money, especially when they lose. So there's one customer that I won't name that was a former, someone who failed to attain office, and then they just don't pay their bills.
It's not somebody that I worked for, is it?
No, it's not. Maybe one of their friends, though.
I'm also wondering. Oh, okay. I'm also wondering if you've ever been tempted to run your own tests on, let's just say, for example, the Trump campaign on your own, just to see how what people actually are thinking about Trump versus maybe what we're hearing in the media.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we do that a lot, just for individual interest, or to generate some content for our blog and our own PR purposes. Because whether or not we have a lot of paying customers in politics, things like an election cycle make great material for social media analytics, as you said, to sort of see what are people really saying. How does that is that similar or different from the popular perception in mainstream media, and so there's any kind of event or national news, or Trump, Prince, you name it. How are people responding to that? What are they saying? What's dominant in the conversation? What's that audience like?
Do you feel comfortable talking about any great success stories that you've had?
There are some very interesting success stories. One consumer brand was running an advertising campaign. It was one of these things where the campaign was going very well, and people were talking about how much they liked the kind of approach they had taken. It was a very multicultural, kind of multi-ethnic kind of ad campaign. And the conversation turned negative because of animal rights concerns due to the products that they were using in the campaign. And so it's sort of a complete turnabout, in the conversation, from fairly positive to extremely negative, and also a complete turnabout in the audience from one set of people to a set of other people that were supporters of PETA and animal rights and things like that. So it's very important, of course, when something like that is occurring, to sort of understand what's going on, who's saying it and why, in a way that's not just, well, here's the volume of tweets about this subject, or even just how much is positive or negative, because then there's a bunch of negative conversation, but you barely understand why. To be able to sort of really see specifically what people's concerns were and why, and who that audience is. If you're that company that wants to now maybe change your products, change the campaign, this now gives you a lot more actionable information to be able to do something differently because of that. So I think there's a number of examples of things like that. There's a number of examples of an apparel company who was launching a major product and decided to change the name of the product based on the analytics they were able to do with our platform. And they realized that consumers didn't really understand what made the product different and better than the competitors. And they realized that if they changed the name, they could sort of convey better what was unique about this product, the message that they were really hoping that people would get. And so they were able to make a very quick and important decision, and kind of react in real time to that they wouldn't have been able to do if they're just sort of sitting back and waiting for like a month later the traditional sort of market research results to roll in.
Have you been called upon to make any predictions in like mobile trends based on your analyses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all of the iPhone product launches, for example, that's always a huge sort of event that's discussed very widely. And so that's the kind of thing, you can look at, whether or not you're Apple. You don't have to be Apple to look at that in our platform and to see what people are discussing. So, is the trend towards sort of larger and larger devices kind of maxed out? Have, with sort of the phablet form factor, is that about as big as it can get and still be something that people can stuff in a pocket or purse and feel comfortable with? Or is there still like an appetite for devices that are even larger than is commonly used now? That's a perfect example of something that, a very specific question that would be hard to arrive at, at a large scale if your only tools are just kind of like plugging in some keywords and seeing if people are positive or negative about it. You have to be able to define the conversation more specifically, see who is talking about. I wish I had a larger screen, or I wish I had a lighter and smaller device I could put in my pocket. These different kinds of themes that might exist in the conversation. You'll be able to kind of zoom in on those, and then see, not just what people are saying about that now, which you could do with a survey or something, to see, okay, over the past 6 years, say, how have those trends changed? What's gone up, what's gone down?
Do you have any interesting insights in like the way that people are using social media specifically, and whether, we've been hearing that sort of like fake people are starting to burn out on Facebook, and that Twitter's, becoming less popular. Have you seen any trends along those lines that you can share with us?
I can't really share any sort of, real platform usage numbers. Yeah. I think, the popular perception of these things, I think, is a little bit different than reality. In the sort of popular perception, Facebook is maybe a little uncool now. Now it's used by the parents, not by the kids who are on Snapchat. Is Twitter sort of waning in popularity? Twitter's still going strong. Facebook is still going strong. Those guys aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Over 5 years and 10 years, who knows, of course. But, a lot of that is sort of the kind of, constant chatter about, sort of trends that's always existed in this industry. And, I remember, over the past 8 years, there have been all kinds of like sort of social platforms that have come and gone. And at one point or another was like the hot thing that we needed to integrate with and make sure we're getting data from Pulse or, whatever the thing was at the time, that was like the critical thing. And, like Friendster and MySpace and, all those things, right? So there's constant evolution. I think it's really hard to, you don't want to be in the business of like trying to just jump on these trends, and jump off of something else, because the big guys have not gone away, and there's a ton of value there for analytics.
Do you still try to pull data from MySpace?
Not from MySpace, no.
So is it all Twitter and Facebook at this point?
There are a bunch of different content sources. Twitter and Facebook are very important, of course. Tumblr is quite important and a very, very interesting group there. Big platform. The sort of pre-social media of message boards and blogs and online forums and things like that. Like that hasn't gone away. That's bigger than ever. So despite all the other ways that people have to share opinions and ideas in different ways, those sort of now relatively old-fashioned ways are still very, very vital, and particularly important for kind of niche vertical subjects. Fans of certain types of music, or car fans. So there's a guy who works in my office who's like a huge VW fan, and so there's all these message boards of, other people who have, VW R32 that, talk about their cars and, performance and all the things like that in a way that people are, maybe less likely to do on Facebook, but, would do kind of at a dedicated forum for sort of like-minded people on that subject. So things like that are still there.
It's funny you mentioned Snapchat, which I'm assuming is impossible to pull from because data is only there for a few seconds and then it disappears.
I suppose it would be possible for them to make anonymized data available in various forms, but they haven't done so far.
Interesting. I'm sure they could benefit from that, but it's interesting that more kids, let's say, are migrating to Snapchat, and I'm wondering if that there's some understanding that they don't want their data just living out there, sort of in perpetuity, to be analyzed.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. To what extent the transience of the data there in Snapchat is actually a significant reason for people using it. I sort of suspect it may have been a reason for people to use it initially. But I think actually, a lot of people on social media either don't know or don't care very much about the fact that a lot of the data that they put out there is, permanent or maybe even public. Because, the way many people use Twitter or other things, I mean, it seems to have complete disregard to the fact that what they're typing is just out there on the internet for anybody to see and retained semi-permanently. So I think a lot of people probably just don't really care that much. I think maybe, perhaps the popularity of Snapchat is more to do with the usual network effects, coolness. Their friends are using it, one thing leads to another, and more and more people get on it.
That kind of makes me think, like, as with the case with our floor, where it looked good on the surface because there was a carpet over it, but then once you rip it up, you realize that it's a giant mess. It kind of has me thinking about the way people use social media, and that it's not always an accurate representation of the truth. Maybe people might post things to make themselves look good, and so maybe exaggerating the truth or just making themselves look better than is real. So I'm wondering how you guys are able to distinguish those kind of fabrications from what's actually true, and how to be sure that what you're presenting is real data.
Of course that's true. That people would lie on social media or boast or be vain and post an excessive number of selfies and photographs of their dinner and all that kind of stuff. But that's true, on non-social media as well, or in any other form of consumer insight that you could obtain. What's the alternative that's more accurate? Getting calling people on their landline at dinner time and getting them to answer your survey questions. Is that going to be more accurate? Or convening a panel of 100 people, put them in a room, pay them $30 to answer a bunch of questions, and then extrapolate from that sample up to the whole population of the United States. Is that better? So absolutely, it has flaws, and people are going to lie, or there will be spam and ads and porn and all kinds of other crazy stuff out there. But also, people are talking with their friends and families and, sharing things naturally and talking about what's important to them. And so I think the truth, the patterns of what's really matters to people come through. For any given person or any given post, it may have by itself no value or dubious value. Is it true or not? Who really is this person? Should we pay attention to them? How do we know this is what they really think? But look at the pattern. Don't look at the individual things. That's why we've gone to the trouble to collect, 1 trillion of these posts, is so you can look at a big picture of thousands or millions of conversations where all of those individual idiosyncrasies kind of cancel out of the noise, and you're left with a pattern that I think you can feel pretty good about really representing what people actually think.
It's kind of an optimistic statement that on the whole the human race is sincere.
I hope so, or at least all of our lies are cancel one another out, in some sense.
Yeah, or they're very well constructed. Oh, also, you should be recognized for being the first person to mention porn on this enterprise.
Well, we are talking about social media,
yeah.
So I guess it goes in territory a little bit. I mean, there've definitely been some odd subjects that people have wanted to research on social media. All these subjects seem odd because when it's someone else's business. To them it's like, hey, this is what our company does. It's not odd for us. when someone did, an exhaustive analysis of, men's shaving and body grooming and manscaping, I guess that's the word. Is that an impolite term?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that word because my wife really has been pushing that on me.
I can understand, frankly.
Yeah.
So maybe you would benefited from some of this market research that they were trying to do on understanding sort of men's preferences on manscaping, and is it driven by themselves? Is it their wife or girlfriend or something like that encourages it? What do they do? What products do they use? How can they encourage more use of their own products for those things?
Yeah. Can you discuss the findings around who's pushing the manscaping?
Oh, I don't remember. This was a few years ago. I would prefer sort of tuning it out. But it's also one of these funny things where you investigate something like this, and naturally there's some sort of enthusiast forum group of kind of like the shaving geeks, who are really into boar bristle brushes and straight razor shaves and these kind of like very technical and kind of old fashioned things of how to get the closest shave. I remember one of the terms of the art that we learned was you want to achieve a BBS shave, baby bottom smooth. So BBS was always like the term they would use, and we're like, well, what is BBS? It's like the ideal experience.
Nice. And is there anybody in your company whose job it is to just like maybe for PR purposes, just to conduct strange searches?
It's interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there, particularly when you can sort of see the whole picture and have some tools and technologies that enable you to aggregate that together to really understand everything. As an example, one of the things we've done recently is some unique technology that enables us to uncover what topics people are interested in. Very fine-grained topics, and not just sort of really high-level things like, are you interested in politics or sports or something? Because that's too broad. But it gets to like very niche topics, and find communities of people that are discussing these different topics. And so, on a network like Tumblr, for example, that's very interesting. There's a lot of those sort of niche communities of people that are interested in all this crazy stuff that you never even knew existed. But there's a small but very passionate group of fans of that thing. One of those was there's a group of fans of John Locke, which refers to John Watson and Sherlock Holmes from the recent TV series, and sort of imagining a fictitious romantic relationship between Sherlock and John, and writing fan fiction around the two of them being lovers as opposed to partners in crime solving, and editing together clips from the TV show of the two of them interacting in some completely normal platonic way that then taken out of context sort of appears to be amorous or something. And so there's this sort of fascinating community of people who are just like really interested in that. Mostly women, actually, as opposed to gay men or something else that you might imagine. And similar other sort of micro genres of Baggins Shield. So people from looking at Bilbo Baggins and Thorin Oakenshield from the Hobbit movies and imagining them having some romantic relationship that didn't actually exist in the movie.
That's funny. I know that was big with Star Trek for a while too, with Kirk and Spock.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know that it was ever analyzed in social media.
Well, we have now quantified that exhaustively, and so that's just one of those interesting things. I mean, it's easy to kind of laugh at that and think that that's kind of maybe an odd thing to be interested in. But there's a group of people that are they're really sort of passionate about that.
Yeah.
And many other similar things. And so I think you have to sort of look at that. I think in a way it gives you some appreciation and respect for some of these different kinds of beliefs and different kinds of fandom and interest that people have. They're normal people, that have a community that are, talking together about something that they think is cool. And it could be something that a lot of other people think is cool, like a popular, video game or superhero franchise or whatever it is, or it could be something that's, has more selective appeal, I guess. But, everybody is a fan of something.
I have this sort of paranoid thing where I never post pictures of myself with a drink on social media because I have the suspicion that eventually, insurance companies are going to start analyzing our images, and maybe they're already doing that. And I looked on your site, and you guys are already doing that.
Yeah, image analysis is a big new area that we've been working a lot on. And the reasons are obvious, right? The content that's posted online is just increasingly visual. Everyone's got a camera in their pockets at all times. People love to use them. So, that kind of content gets posted. And, if you're willing to take a picture of something, that's obviously something that's important to you and matters in your life in some way. And so if that depicts a product, or a place or an activity, that's a pretty strong sign that that's something that you have some interest or affinity in, and is therefore a good way to understand, what kind of person you are, what kind of activities you like to do, what kinds of brands you're a customer of, all those kinds of things. In a way that people might or might not do in the same way in text. And so, you had mentioned the example of, people with having a picture with a drink in your hand. One of my colleagues here used to work for a company whose business was trying to find exactly those pictures. They had a service to try to help college students, when they graduate, need to get a job, clean up their social media accounts. Like, okay, let's find all those party pictures with the red Solo cup or the beer bottle or something in it, and various other things, and make sure we can delete all of those before your potential employer finds them. So so there's another use case for that kind of photo analytics. But what's happened is there's also been a huge revolution in the data science in the past few years for what's possible to do in image analytics. And so there's a huge amount of research, particularly coming out of companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft. But a lot of it's been published as papers and open source code that's available for anyone to look at. That's really fascinating. Things that would have been complete science fiction 10 years ago is now quite easily and accurately done. For example, to be able to take a picture and recognize different objects in that picture, tell whether it's inside or outside. Is it at the beach or in a store or in a restaurant? Is it somebody running or swimming? Is it this or that? It's pretty cool stuff, and it's quite amazing that you can do that in a picture. Recognizing faces, recognizing whether they're male or female, estimating the gender, age, and ethnicity from the faces. All that kind of stuff is possible to do with photos now.
What are the predominant requests? Is it mostly brands sort of trying to figure out how their products are being used in the real world?
That's one of them for sure. I mean, I think that there are a number of use cases, and I think this is all still really in its infancy. But one of those use cases would be sort of see, here's some photos of our product kind of out there in the wild. How are people using it? Are there examples from those photos of people using the product in some different context or in some different way that they might have anticipated? Also, just here's just people that are have a picture with our logo visible in it somewhere. That alone can be valuable to say, okay, this person has perhaps some affinity, with our logo. Maybe it's just in the background or just incidental, but if it's there on their T-shirt or something like that, that's a pretty strong sign of interest from that person. So what are the demographics or psychographics of that audience? How can we understand them? Lots of different ways to look at that I think companies are just beginning to think about.
Are you able to pull from video at all, or is it still just limited to pictures?
Video can be done as well. It's just more expensive. I mean, in the end, a video is just a series of pictures. And so if you can do something with a still photo, you can do it with video. I think the interesting thing for us would be to scale up the volume of data and the use cases for photos first before tackling video, because I think photos are really the first and more important thing. It's just much easier and faster for people to generate photos, and so I think we would like to be able to have as broad a coverage as possible of publicly posted photos, from as many different platforms. You get a really nice, complete view of what's going on out there. But it's a major technical challenge as well to pull in all of that image content and run some fairly sophisticated algorithms on those to identify all these features like objects and people and brand logos and things like that.
Do you have any clients that are sort of using your technology for evil? Like, I'm wondering if it can be used in a manipulative way to create any sort of desired impression. The way statistics can be manipulated a million ways. Like, let's say you want the data to prove that Brykman is awesome, and so you do an analysis of the words Brykman and awesome, and then come up with this answer that 90% of the time, the words Brykman and awesome are this closely associated, and therefore this many people think that Brykman is awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure that exists all the time, right? Anytime you have that massive amount of data, you can find some correlation or something in there. I don't know if you ever looked at the Google Trends data where you can look at trends in search volume. They have that publicly available on their site somewhere.
Yeah.
So people have made these funny kind of like spurious correlations where they show like, oh, look, like, the search traffic for this particular keyword is like almost exactly correlated with some other totally unrelated thing, right? Because there's so many things out there in the world that, you can eventually find two things that seem to perfectly correlate, even though they're completely unrelated. So with 1 trillion posts of social media data, if there's a story that you want to tell, you can probably find data in there somewhere that's going to, support your thesis that Brykman is awesome, or whatever it might be. I think, a particular thing users should be aware of when using a product like this is, what's the volume of the content you're looking at? Are you inferring too much from too small a sample size? If you're looking for something very specific and, you come back with a small amount of data and you start looking at all these wonderful, trends and topics and audience demographics and stuff like that, do you have to step back and say, wait a second, this is like 100 people, this isn't really telling us anything significant. If this is 100,000 people, then maybe this is meaningful. But if it's 10 people or 50 people or 100 people, maybe that's too small to read that much into what those results are.
With voice recognition being so popular and commonplace now, amazingly, are you guys thinking about starting to analyze, podcast audio, things like that?
That's come up as well. Another big source of audio is call transcripts. So from a call center, when people are calling in, they have tech support questions and things like that. Very often, the companies that run those systems have some way to automatically do speech to text to those things so that you can save all that in a database and then do some kind of data mining on which things were people calling in about most frequently. And so that's something that we've explored with some of our customers as well. We have the ability for our customers to upload custom private content that they own into our system and have it analyzed using the same set of tools that we use for the public social media data. So in other words, in addition to tracking what's being said publicly on Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and things like that, if you have your own private source of data, maybe it's a private online community or offline documents or surveys or the transcribed call center records or things like that, you could put those into the system and analyze them. So I think that's one potential application of the speech transcription that could be interesting.
Oh, that's cool. Lastly, knowing what you know, do you have any advice or warnings for people regarding what they should or shouldn't be presenting on social media?
It's the same advice that anyone would give, that your mother would give if you asked her. So
not my mother.
That said, of course, our business is not really looking at individual things like that, whether they're ill-advised or not.
Right.
We're in the business of looking at trends and things kind of in the aggregate. And so if somebody says something dumb or deceptive, as you said, in your earlier question, to us that doesn't particularly matter because we really need to see the big picture. The big picture is always more interesting and insightful than any one specific detail. It's nice to be able to look at the specific details to kind of get some anecdotal color to that big picture. But the big picture is that's what's going to drive the insights that customers can make business decisions from.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris, for hopping on, man.
Absolutely.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in to Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics. Stay tuned for the next episode. Take it easy, man. I'll see you later.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.